You may know My Darling Clementine as one of the greatest westerns ever made, but behind the dusty streets of Tombstone lies a story full of strange, surprising, and sometimes shocking facts that you never knew. Would you believe that the final kiss was never meant to happen? Or that Victor Mature, who played Doc Holliday, didn't even want to play the role the way John Ford demanded? What about the fact that Walter Brennan scared the other actors by playing a villain despite being known for playing sweet old men? There were dangerous stunts, unpredictable sandstorms, and even live bullets fired to make horses run faster. Would you have imagined that Henry Fonda served in World War II, which provided him with the experience for his role? What about the fact that Linda Darnell studied real Civil War journals to act out a painful surgery scene with no anesthetic? There are many more shocking facts to be unraveled as we dive into the 20 weird facts you didn't know about My Darling Clementine. Fasten your seatbelt. It's going to be a fantastic ride with you today. Let's go. The film's title is taken from the folk song Oh My Darling Clementine. Oh My Darling Clementine is a classic American folk ballad that dates back to the 1860s. It's a sad, slightly humorous song about a miner's daughter named Clementine who tragically drowns after slipping into a river. The narrator, who is presumed to be her lover, laments her death in a way that is sorrowful but absurd in every way. The lyrics go something like, Oh my darling, oh my darling, oh my darling Clementine, thou art lost and gone forever, dreadful sorry, Clementine. The song is simple, repetitive, and was incredibly popular in the 19th and early 20th centuries. It was often sung around campfires, in schools, and even parodied in cartoons. But why was it used in the film? This was not just another random choice by the filmmakers. The selection was made after careful thought. The film's title, tone, and themes are deeply tied to the song. My Darling Clementine is a 1946 film directed by John Ford. It is a Western film loosely based on the events leading up to the gunfight at the OK Corral. But beyond the gunfights and cowboy action, the movie also has a deeply melancholic and nostalgic tone, especially around the female character Clementine Carter. While Clementine Carter in the film is not the same as the miner's daughter in the song, the name itself carries symbolic meaning. Just like in the folk song, Clementine represents something innocent that was tragically lost. Her presence in the rough frontier town of Tombstone brings a sense of civilization, but by the end of the film, she doesn't stay. Her departure leaves Wyatt Earp and the town feeling an emotional emptiness, just as the miner in the song does after Clementine dies. Because of the similarities in their stories, director Ford chose the music for the movie's score. The melody of Oh My Darling Clementine plays over the opening and closing credits. Hence, the film borrows its title and emotional theme from a well-known folk song. Victor Mature's struggle with portraying Doc Holliday's melancholy depth. Victor Mature, who played Doc Holliday in My Darling Clementine, faced a unique challenge that went beyond simply learning lines or riding horses. Known for his physical presence and action hero looks, Mature initially felt insecure about portraying a character who was not just tough but vulnerable. Unlike the typical Western tough guy, Doc Holliday was a complex figure. He was an intelligent gambler and doctor battling tuberculosis, which portrays a sense of sorrow. According to reports from the set, Mature wanted to play Holliday as a more physically aggressive, robust character, leaning into toughness rather than vulnerability. In an off-camera interview, Mature said, I was thinking of Doc as someone you'd punch first and ask questions later. I wanted to show the strength, the fight, but John Ford had a different vision. Ford believed that Holliday's power came from his internal torment and tragic intelligence, not just his guns or fists. Mature later reflected in interviews, At first I wasn't sure I could pull off that kind of subtle, haunted character. It's easier to be the tough guy everyone expects, but Ford was right. Doc's tragedy is what makes him unforgettable. This tension between Mature's instincts and Ford's direction resulted in a Doc Holliday performance that is layered and memorable. Mature captures the character's strong will and intelligence, but also his vulnerability and looming mortality. Shot in Monument Valley, not Tombstone. When audiences watch My Darling Clementine, they're drawn into a cinematic version of the Wild West, but what many don't realize is that the landscape they're seeing isn't Tombstone, Arizona, where the actual events took place. Instead, the film was shot almost entirely in Monument Valley, a remote desert region on the Arizona-Utah border, far from the real location of the OK Corral. This was a conscious choice by John Ford, who valued the mythic feel of the West over its literal geography. Monument Valley is unlike any other place in the United States. Its massive sandstone buttes rise out of the desert like ancient monuments. The scenery is breathtaking, and it almost demands to be photographed. Ford had fallen in love with it years earlier, during the making of his breakout Western Stagecoach in 1939. That film had turned Monument Valley into a cinematic icon, and from then on, Ford used it again and again as the visual language of the West. So when it was time to make My Darling Clementine, Ford didn't hesitate to bring his cast and crew to Monument Valley, even though it was hundreds of miles from Tombstone and looked nothing like the real town. Tombstone, by contrast, was just a dusty, unremarkable mining town. It lacked the vastness and drama that Monument Valley offered in every frame. Ford later admitted that the power of a story sometimes lies not in where it happened, but in how it feels. Hence, Monument Valley gave My Darling Clementine an emotional scale that the real location never could. Walter Brennan's chilling turn as Old Man Clanton terrified cast and crew. Walter Brennan was widely recognized in Hollywood for his kind and comedic characters. He'd always play the lovable sidekick or the wise old-timer with a twinkle in his eye. But in My Darling Clementine, Brennan took a surprising turn, playing Old Man Clanton, a vicious villain who's far from the warm figures Brennan usually portrayed. This role showcased a darker, more menacing side of his talent, stunning both audiences and the film's cast. Brennan's performance was so intense and convincing that John Ford reportedly said, "He scared the other actors." The usually jovial Brennan transformed into a ruthless and threatening presence on screen, making his character truly frightening. Brennan himself admitted in later interviews that playing Clanton was both challenging and liberating. "I'm usually the funny guy," he said, "but this time I wanted to tap into something darker. It was fun to surprise everyone, including myself." His chilling portrayal gave the film an unpredictable edge. Knowing that someone so familiar as Brennan could turn into a terrifying villain added a layer of realism and unpredictability to the story. This unexpected casting choice and Brennan's powerful performance elevated My Darling Clementine, proving that great actors can break typecasting and bring new depths to their craft when given the chance. The entire town set was hand-built for the film. When My Darling Clementine was filmed in 1946, director John Ford wasn't interested in cutting corners. So instead of using pre-existing Western backlots, the production team built an entire town from scratch. John Ford believed his actors needed to feel they were truly living in the film's world. That meant building real structures, not just stage props. The scale of the construction was impressive. It reportedly cost over $250,000, a massive sum at the time, especially for a Western. But Ford felt it was worth every dollar. The town's realism gave his camera something authentic to capture from every angle. Building a city from the ground up in the middle of nowhere wasn't easy. The crew had to bring in materials, tools, and labor to an isolated location with limited access roads. They worked under the burning sun and through occasional dust storms, and that was what made the set more atmospheric than practical. Dust settled on the windowsills, wind blew through the gaps in the boards, shadows fell naturally across rough wooden floors. Even after filming ended, the town continued to live on. Instead of tearing it down, the production sold the set to the Navajo Tribal Council for just $5, and it continued to be used for other westerns over the years. Ford clashed with Zanuck over the final cut. In the making of My Darling Clementine, the creative battle didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling. Behind the scenes, a serious conflict unfolded between the film's legendary director John Ford and Darryl F. Zanuck, the powerful studio head at 20th Century Fox. What began as a disagreement over tone and pacing turned into a significant editing war, one that eventually reshaped the film from what Ford had initially intended. John Ford was not only a master of cinema but also a profoundly personal filmmaker. His movies often had their own flow, and when he delivered his first cut of My Darling Clementine, it reflected that style. But when Darryl Zanuck saw the cut, he saw problems. Zanuck was a savvy studio executive, known for having a sharp sense of what would work commercially. He believed Ford's version was too slow, moody, and possibly too romantic in a way that might confuse audiences. He also felt some scenes, especially those involving emotional tension between Wyatt and Clementine, or those showing Doc Holliday's deeper personal struggles, added unnecessary ambiguity. Zanuck ordered extensive edits, cutting around 30 minutes of footage from Ford's original cut. In particular, scenes exploring the romantic undertones between Wyatt and Clementine were trimmed, likely to keep the film focused on the central conflict with the Clantons and to avoid muddying Wyatt's motivations. Zanuck also reshot a few scenes, including the final farewell between Wyatt and Clementine. In Ford's original version, the goodbye was subtle and restrained. It was a simple handshake, filled with unspoken emotion. Zanuck found it too cold and asked for a new ending in which Wyatt gently kissed Clementine on the cheek before riding away. It's a small change, but one that shifts the emotional tone, adding a clearer sense of affection and closure for the audience. Ford was reportedly furious, though he never launched a public battle over the changes. His original cut remained unseen for decades, until a pre-release version was discovered in the UCLA archives in the 1990s. Though not Ford's untouched edit, it contained alternate scenes and gave modern viewers a glimpse of what had been lost. In the end, My Darling Clementine is still considered one of Ford's masterpieces. There were historical inaccuracies behind My Darling Clementine. While My Darling Clementine is revered as one of the greatest westerns of all time, it plays fast and loose with historical accuracy. Though featuring life figures like Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, John Ford reimagines key facts, timelines, and outcomes to fit a mythic, emotionally driven narrative rather than a documentary-style account. Ford himself once shrugged off critics in an interview about the film's loose grasp on facts, famously saying, "This isn't a history book, it's a movie." Now let's break down three of the most notable historical inaccuracies. The first is that James Earp's role is completely reversed. In the film, James Earp is depicted as the youngest of the Earp brothers and is murdered early, which acts as the emotional catalyst for Wyatt to take up the Marshal's badge and restore law and order in Tombstone. But in reality, James Earp was the eldest of the Earp siblings. He survived the events at the OK Corral. He lived a relatively quiet life and died in 1926, decades after the events portrayed in the film. He was also not present during the famous gunfight because he had moved on from the rougher parts of law enforcement by then. So why did Ford choose to alter this real-life fact? It is because it worked better to have the murder of a younger, more innocent brother ignite Wyatt's sense of justice. The audience needed a reason to believe in Wyatt's mission. That was genius, right? The second fact that was altered is the dramatization of Doc Holliday's death. Doc Holliday finally dies of his illness after he participates in the climactic gunfight. But in actual history, Doc Holliday survived the OK Corral shootout, which occurred in 1881 and died in 1887 in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, of tuberculosis. Now that was unfair. Even Ford had no explanation for allowing this change. Do you know that even the gunfight is set in the wrong year? The film explicitly places the OK Corral shootout in 1882, but historical records show it happened on October 26, 1981. These may seem like minor slips, but they're one of many timeline compressions and shifts Ford used to make the story more cohesive. Film historian Joseph McBride noted in an interview, Ford was never interested in strict accuracy. He was interested in truth with a capital T, the emotional truth, the myth of the West. Despite these inaccuracies, the film remains one of the most enduring westerns ever created. Linda Darnell's intense surgery without an anesthetic.
I haven't got anything to put you to sleep, so this is going to hurt like blazes. Yell, scream,
One of the most striking and emotionally powerful moments in My Darling Clementine comes from Linda Darnell's portrayal of Chihuahua, particularly during a scene where she performs a painful surgery without the use of an anesthetic. What many fans didn't know is Linda's deep commitment to making the moment feel as real and raw as possible. To prepare for the role, Darnell went beyond the script and sought out real Civil War-era medical journals and personal accounts. These journals described how, in the harsh conditions of the Old West and during the Civil War, surgeries often had to be done quickly and without modern painkillers. Patients would endure incredible pain while doctors worked with limited tools and knowledge. Linda drew inspiration from these first-hand stories to inform her portrayal. On set, Linda's performance was so intense and convincing that many crew members and co-stars found the scene deeply affecting. Even director John Ford praised Linda's dedication, reportedly saying, "Linda made that scene live. You could almost feel the pain in the room." For Linda, the scene was one of her most challenging but rewarding performances. She later said in interviews, "I wanted the audience to understand the reality of medicine back then. There was no anesthesia, no comfort. It was raw and brutal, but it was about saving lives." Linda's commitment to historical accuracy and emotional truth helped elevate the film. Groundbreaking use of natural light and shadow. One of the most striking features of My Darling Clementine is its unique, moody lighting, which helped the film stand out from other westerns of its time. This look was carefully crafted by director John Ford and cinematographer Joseph McDonald, who pushed the boundaries of filmmaking by using natural light in innovative ways. In the 1940s, Hollywood movies often relied on bright, even lighting. Studio sets were typically flooded with artificial lights to ensure every detail was precise on camera. Ford and McDonald wanted something very different. They aimed for a style that felt raw and more connected to the actual landscape of the West. To achieve this, they would shoot many scenes during dawn or dusk, times of day when the sun is low in the sky and natural light creates long shadows, soft glows, and dramatic contrasts. Ford and McDonald created scenes that shimmer with natural beauty and a sense of moodiness. The long shadows cast by buildings, trees, and characters helped communicate tension, mystery, and emotional weight without needing extra dialogue or music. This approach was a departure from the bright, theatrical lighting standard in other westerns and drama films of the time. It influenced many future filmmakers and cinematographers, who saw how adequate natural lighting could be in creating mood and realism. Minimal sound design in the gunfight scene. One of the most memorable moments in My Darling Clementine is the famous gunfight at the OK Corral. Unlike many films of the era, which relied heavily on dramatic music and sound effects to amplify tension and excitement, director John Ford chose a radically different approach. He and his sound team decided to keep the audio during the gunfight almost completely minimal, focusing only on the natural sounds of the scene. The result was a moment of intense realism that surprised audiences. Without a swelling soundtrack to cue their feelings, viewers were forced to experience the violence more directly. This minimalist sound design also made the scene more immersive. The sound of wind emphasizes how empty and exposed the setting is, while the crunch of boots on dirt grounds the action in the harsh reality of the frontier town. The lack of music lets the visuals and natural sounds carry the emotional weight, allowing the audience to engage with the scene on a deeper level. This technique influenced later filmmakers who sought to portray violence more realistically and thoughtfully. Instead of bombarding viewers with sound effects and music, many directors learned to use silence and subtle sound design to create tension and meaning. By stripping away the usual musical cues, Ford delivered a moment of raw, gripping realism that still resonates with audiences today. My Darling Clementine was not filmed in black and white. When My Darling Clementine was made, the filmmakers faced an important choice about how the movie should look. Today, we know the film as a striking black and white classic, but before settling on that look, the production team experimented with a muted sepia tone. Sepia is a warm, brownish tint often used in old photographs. It gives images nostalgic like memories from the past or faded postcards from a long-gone era. For a Western like My Darling Clementine, which is steeped in history and legend, a sepia tone could have added an extra layer of atmosphere, making the story feel like a dusty memory of the Old West. During early test shoots, the filmmakers tried out this sepia effect, hoping it would set the right emotional tone. However, as promising as the sepia tests looked, the team soon ran into several problems. First, the cost was significantly higher than shooting in standard black and white. Sepia tinting required additional processing steps in the lab, which meant extra time and money. For a studio like 20th Century Fox, which balanced artistic vision with budget concerns, this was a significant hurdle. More importantly, there were clarity issues. The muted sepia tones sometimes made the images look softer or less sharp. Details like facial expressions, clothing textures, or the outlines of buildings which were crucial for storytelling didn't stand out as clearly as they did in pure black and white. The filmmakers also worried that sepia might confuse audiences who were used to black and white films. At that time, sepia was less common and might have felt unusual or distracting. Because of these concerns, the team decided to abandon the sepia experiments and stick with black and white. This choice turned out to be wise. While the sepia tone never made it to the final film, those early tests are a fascinating reminder of the creative risks and technical challenges filmmakers faced in the 1940s. Henry Fonda's wartime experience shaped his portrayal of Wyatt Earp.
Good evening, Mr. Clem. Good evening. The fellow with the trail herd, remember?
When Henry Fonda stepped into the role of Wyatt Earp in My Darling Clementine, he was coming back from a very personal and transformative experience. Fonda had just finished serving in the U.S. Navy during World War II, and this period profoundly influenced how he approached the character of the legendary lawman. In interviews, Fonda shared, "Coming back from the war, I felt the weight of what people endure. Wyatt isn't just a gunslinger. He's a man carrying the scars of his past and the burden of justice. That was something I understood deeply." John Ford recognized Fonda's ability to bring this subtle emotional depth to Earp. He told reporters, "Henry's time in the Navy gave him a seriousness that no actor could fake. You see it in his eyes. That's what made Wyatt real." Unlike many Western heroes who are loud or flamboyant, Wyatt is reserved and reflective. There's a sadness beneath the calm exterior, hinting at the losses he's suffered and the hard choices he's made. His war experience gave him a haunted quality of a man who has seen too much but still stands firm. Unpredictable weather in Monument Valley challenged the production. Filming My Darling Clementine in Monument Valley meant battling the region's notoriously unpredictable weather. Monument Valley, located on the Arizona-Utah border, is famous for its breathtaking rock formations and wide-open skies. Still, it's also well known among locals and visitors for its harsh, ever-changing conditions. For the cast and crew of the film, these weather challenges created significant obstacles throughout the shoot. One of the most considerable difficulties was the frequent and sudden sandstorms. These aren't just small gusts of wind blowing some dust around, but intense storms that can whip up thick clouds of sand and dirt, reducing visibility to almost zero and making it impossible to shoot. Sandstorms could strike with little warning, forcing the crew to halt filming abruptly and seek shelter. Because of the unpredictability, many scenes had to be filmed between sandstorms, often with long waits in between. Actors, directors, and technicians sometimes found themselves stuck for hours, waiting for the wind to die down so they could resume shooting. This meant long days under the hot desert sun, with little to do but prepare or rest until the weather calmed. But despite these difficulties, John Ford and his team persevered because they knew Monument Valley's unique landscape was essential to the film's look and feel. In the end, the unpredictable weather of Monument Valley became a creative force that shaped My Darling Clementine into the iconic Western it is today. Fight scenes were shot with minimal rehearsals. What do you think about the gunfight scenes and brawls in My Darling Clementine? Does it feel polished or overly choreographed? Of course not. They were raw, unpredictable, and sometimes even a little messy. That was because director John Ford intentionally avoided the kind of carefully rehearsed, dance-like fight sequences that were common in many Hollywood westerns of the era. Instead, he preferred to make it spontaneous and realistic, even if it meant the action sometimes looked rough around the edges. Ford believed that real fights were chaotic, To bring this authenticity to the screen, he gave his actors minimal preparation before shooting fight scenes. Rather than extensive rehearsals or detailed choreography, the cast was encouraged to react naturally and improvise. They moved as they might if they were genuinely caught in a sudden brawl or gunfight. This approach created a realistic feeling that sets My Darling Clementine apart from more stylized westerns. Actors had to trust their instincts and each other, responding in the moment rather than following strict stage directions. This sometimes led to uneven or awkward movements, but those imperfections actually enhanced the realism. While this method was unconventional and might have frustrated actors, it was essential to Ford's vision of the West. Today, Ford's approach is seen as a pioneering choice that influenced later filmmakers who strive for realism in action scenes. Wyatt Earp's personal stories inspired the final OK Corral shootout. One of the most iconic moments in My Darling Clementine is, of course, the final shootout at the OK Corral. This legendary gunfight has been dramatized in countless films and stories, but what sets John Ford's version apart is its unique connection to the real Wyatt Earp. Decades before making the film, Ford had met Earp and heard his first-hand account of the events. This profoundly influenced how Ford shaped the climactic showdown in the movie. Wyatt Earp, a legendary lawman of the Old West, was known for his role in the famous Tombstone gunfight, where he, his brothers, and Doc Holliday faced off against the Clanton and McClory brothers. Over the years, many versions of the shootout circulated, each with its own twists and exaggerations. Ford, however, believed his portrayal was based on the most accurate information because it came straight from the source. In the 1920s and 1930s, Ford met Earp and listened to his stories. Earp described the tension leading up to the shootout, the positioning of the men, and how the violence erupted. Ford took careful notes and used those memories decades later when making My Darling Clementine. He wanted the film's final gunfight to feel authentic to the real events. That said, Ford was also a storyteller and knew that a movie needed drama to grip its audience. So while he claimed his version was the most accurate, the film still heavily dramatizes the shootout. For example, the actual shootout lasted only about 30 seconds, but in the movie, it's stretched and choreographed to build tension and emotion. The blend of Earp's personal stories and Ford's cinematic vision created a shootout that feels both grounded in history and compelling as drama, and it is one of the reasons why My Darling Clementine remains a beloved Western. Clementine versus Chihuahua symbolize the frontier's clash with civilization.
Go on back.
I'm not getting out till she leaves town.
You want me to take you on my knee and
You
spank
take your hands off me. Leave me alone.
In My Darling Clementine, John Ford uses the film's two main female characters, Clementine Carter and Chihuahua, to explore a powerful theme: the meeting and clash of civilization and the wild frontier. These women represent two very different ideas about femininity and society, each embodying contrasting cultural values that reflect the larger transformation of the American West. Clementine Carter, played as a refined woman from Boston, symbolizes civilization, purity, and order. She is educated, proper, and embodies the ideals of grace, respectability, and moral clarity possessed by the East. Her character represents the push toward law and the imposition of social norms on the untamed West. Clementine's presence in Tombstone signals the arrival of civilized values, which contrast with the rough and tumble world around her. On the other side is Chihuahua, portrayed as Native American. She is wilder, less constrained by strict morality, and embodies the untamed, more ambiguous nature of the frontier. Chihuahua is passionate, fiery, and complex, often blurring lines between right and wrong. Her character represents the rawness and unpredictability of the West before it was civilized. John Ford intentionally crafted this contrast, creating a symbolic duality that extends beyond romance or drama. Ford once explained in an interview, "Clementine is the promise of order and hope, but Chihuahua is the spirit of the land, wild, stubborn, and real." The West is caught between these two forces. This thematic tension mirrors the larger story of the American West's transformation. By weaving these archetypes into the narrative, Ford deepens the film's emotional and cultural complexity. High winds and gunfire were used to spur horses. One of the most intense behind-the-scenes stories from My Darling Clementine involves a thrilling horseback scene that pushed the boundaries of safety and filmmaking techniques at the time. In this sequence, Walter Brennan and his gang are seen riding hard across the landscape, battling the elements and their enemies. But what you didn't see is that behind the camera, the production used a massive wind machine and a controversial method to make the horses gallop faster. This machine was used to simulate the harsh, swirling winds of the desert, adding energy to the scene. The horses and riders had to struggle through fierce gusts that could throw them off balance, making control difficult and increasing the risk of accidents. To encourage the horses to move faster through this challenging environment, the filmmakers resorted to a more dangerous and controversial technique. They fired blank gunshots with no bullets, but loud noise near the horses' ears. The sudden blasts were intended to spook the animals, triggering their natural flight response and causing them to accelerate rapidly. While this method achieved the desired visual effect, it raised significant concerns about animal welfare. Firing blanks close to the horses could cause stress, fear, and even hearing damage. In the end, that horseback scene stands out not just for its visual power, but also for the raw, sometimes dangerous filmmaking methods used to bring it to life. Ford refused to use stunt doubles. John Ford was known for his commitment to authenticity, and one way he brought that realism to My Darling Clementine was by refusing to use stunt doubles for many of the riding and fight scenes. This decision significantly impacted the film's natural feel. When you watch the movie, you can see the actors really in the thick of the action. Their movements sometimes look less polished or perfectly choreographed than typical Hollywood fight scenes, but that's because they were doing the real physical work themselves. However, asking actors to perform their own stunts wasn't without risks. Actors sometimes got bruises, scrapes, or strained muscles from the intense physical work. These injuries were seen as a small price to pay for achieving the kind of realism Ford wanted. Ford's insistence on minimal stunt doubles also influenced how the film was shot. The camera often stayed close to the actors during action scenes, capturing their expressions and movements clearly. This intimate style helped the audience connect with the characters emotionally, as we could see the strain and determination on their faces during fights or escapes. Today, most productions use professional stunt performers extensively, both to protect actors and to create visually impressive action sequences. But Ford's approach reminds us of a different era of filmmaking, where actors often threw themselves fully into physical roles to bring stories to life in the most authentic way possible. Henry Fonda improvised chair-balancing scene. One of the most memorable and subtle moments in My Darling Clementine wasn't planned at all. It was Henry Fonda's spontaneous idea, who played Wyatt Earp. The scene in question takes place outside the saloon, where Earp balances on a chair, calmly surveying the situation. Fonda improvised the action on the spot, and director John Ford loved it so much that he kept it in the film's final cut. Ford praised the scene for adding depth to Fonda's portrayal, making Earp feel more human and believable. It's a quiet moment that contrasts with the tension and violence surrounding him. The fact that the scene was improvised also shows how much Ford trusted his actors and valued their creativity. For audiences, the chair balancing scene stands out because it's unexpected and memorable. In the end, what began as a small improvisation became a defining moment for the character. The film was a high-stakes investment. My Darling Clementine was made with a relatively high budget of about $2 million, a substantial investment for a Western film in 1946. Spending $2 million on the production meant the film could afford things that lower-budget Westerns couldn't. Things like the full-scale town set built on location, high-quality costumes, experienced actors like Henry Fonda and Victor Mature, and innovative technical choices such as natural lighting and atmospheric cinematography. According to studio records, the film's U.S. rentals grossed about $2,750,000, meaning it made back its budget and then some. This was a solid financial success, especially considering the post-war film market was still stabilizing. In interviews, producer Darryl F. Zanuck acknowledged the financial risks, but praised Ford's vision. He said, "We spent what was necessary to tell the story right, and the audience rewarded us. It's not just a Western, it's a cinematic experience." This combination of a high production budget and solid box office returns reinforce the idea that investing in quality storytelling and filmmaking craft could succeed commercially, and My Darling Clementine is a real-life example of this. Which of these weird facts about My Darling Clementine is most striking for you? Share with us in the comments and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out other videos before you leave.